All right, we're live. Anybody who's not talking, make sure you mute yourself. Thanks everybody for joining us. What I'm going to show today is kind of our rough draft of Steel, the new version of Steel that supports ES6, CommonJS, and AMD and Steel's old legacy syntax. So I'm going to share my screen and show an app that I'm working on. Everything right now is in a very rough state, so some stuff might not work while I'm going through this little demo. Just bear with me. All right, we're live. Anybody who's not talking, make sure you mute yourself. Thanks everybody for joining us. What I'm going to show today is kind of our rough draft of Steel, the new version of Steel that supports ES6, CommonJS, and AMD and Steel's old legacy syntax. So I'm going to share my screen and show an app that I'm working on. Everything right now is in a very rough state, so some stuff might not work while I'm going through this little demo. Just there. Hopefully am I still sharing my screen? Sorry about that. Okay, I think everything's working now. Later those other ones. It took me forever to figure out how to get Chrome to, or how to get Google Plus actually started, the meetup. So let's take a look at the app that I made, and what I did here. So I just set out yesterday trying to make a little demo app that would allow, let me open it. Try to solve some kind of a hard problem. Make a progressively loaded app that, if the person's not logged in, it waits for them to be logged in before redirecting them to the page that they actually need to see. So here I just have a basic app that I can put in my username and a password. And once I log in, it'll by default take me to the home page if there's nothing in the hash. I haven't made it work with push state yet. And then I can see, I just wanted to try to integrate jQuery UI and Bootstrap. I got jQuery UI going pretty well. Once you click on a link, it'll take you to another page that will progressively load some jQuery UI accordion, and then it can take you to another page that will progressively load jQuery UI. This will start to scroll. Yeah, little slider. I didn't get the styling to work right yet. And then you can log out, and it takes you back, but once I log in, it should take me back to the page that I was just at. So most of my time was actually spent trying to get this work with CanJS. The first thing I did, though, was install the new StealTools and StealJS. StealTools you install through npm. So I would, if you want to kind of follow the same thing, you can create a package.json. Right now I'm pointing StealTools to our repository's master. We haven't done a full release yet, but if you do want to try this out, you can install StealTools like that. And then make sure you also have Bower installed globally. And then I installed Steel with Bower. So in my bower.json, I have Steel, and again here I'm pointing to the latest commit of Steel in the master branch. So if anybody wants to start trying StealJS and just some naming terminology. When I say StealJS, I mean kind of the Steel project as a whole. Steel without the JS is the client-side loader, and StealTools is the build tool. So once you have that, once you've got Steel, the client, and StealTools, the builder, installed, I did it through Bower and through npm, I started creating an application So I just created a main.js, and here I'm using ES6 module syntax to import my dependencies. I'll talk about what this app does in a little bit, but for now, I'm actually going to just kind of hide this and show getting just the basics working. So hold on, I'm going to cut and paste this for now. Come back to that later. So I also install. Okay, so once you have a page and you just want to do something very simple, I'm going to console log hello world. I can create an HTML page that will load that module. To do this, I'm going to load Steel, the Steel client, and I'm going to tell it where my main module is, or the name of my main module. So my main module is going to be main, and that will look for main.js. By default, Steel will always try to load a Steel config. You can configure the path of that. I'll show that in a little bit. But by the way, if anybody has any questions from Bitovi, please go ahead and ask. Or the question and the Q&A app is loaded, so I will. Oh my goodness. Is anybody following? I think I just lost my connection.
No, we can still hear you.
Oh, this is an old connection. Okay, good. Sorry. Looking at the wrong page. Someone just let me know if there's questions on the Q&A thing while I'm going through it. Anyways, so you load Steel, and then you tell it what main module do you load. Steel will load a Steel config by default. That is a sibling of Bower components. You can configure where this is, but by default, it'll load Steel config here. You can still use the old steel.config, but you can also configure stuff straight on the on system, which I'll get to that in a little bit. But let's just say for now, I'm going to create another temp config. I'll come back to this. This is like the full one you need to get CanJS and everything working. This just configures paths and everything. For now, I'm just going to have it empty, and I'm going to load my main page again. Now it will do nothing, and it'll just say hello world. You can see here it loads Steel config, then Steel dev still gets loaded automatically, and then it loaded our main module. If I want to load jQuery, I'd have to do two things. In main, I'd have to first import the ES6 syntax. I can use whatever syntax I want, but I'm going to import $ from jQuery. And in Steel config, I'd have to configure where there is no jQuery is not here. I'd have to tell jQuery to load from Bower components. There's two ways of doing this. The good way of doing this in the long term is put everything mostly on system.js, on the system loader. So you would configure system.paths to be an object with.
Justin, you don't want to overwrite paths.
Yeah, I know. I was just thinking about that, but I was. It's fine for right now until I start using less. Actually, system.paths already exists, so yeah, you typically don't want to overwrite it. The reason is because Steel will by default add to paths to know how to load, where to load steel.dev and where to load less in its CSS plugins. So typically you just want to add properties. So steel.paths.jQuery, and then I'll give the path to jQuery, which will be our components jQuery, I think it's dist, and then I think it's just jQuery. Okay, jQuery.js. Okay, so with that, I should be able to, in my main, use jQuery to add to the body of hello world. Reload my thing. And I must have given it the wrong path. Oh, I forgot to save it. Okay, I get hello world. Hooray! Okay, so next thing is, you know, this is in the client loading tracer. We probably don't want that. It'd be much better to build this. So I created a little build script. Now you can use a Grunt, but I didn't get that working. You can also write your own build script. Well, Grunt works. I just haven't configured it yet. I might try to do that in a second here. But to just kind of build it manually, you require StealTools, and you call StealTools build with the path to your config. Not the relative path of this file, but the actual absolute path to your config file. And then, because your config file actually defines your root folder, right? So that's why you give it your config. This is the root folder, basically. And then you tell it the main module you want to build. And then here I'm passing verbose so that I can see everything that it's doing. So now if where did it go? Now if I run node build, we'll break. Let me see why. Why would it break? Why is it running sizzle? That's very strange. I just tried this earlier. This should not be running. I'm confused why it is. Matt, any ideas?
No, I'm trying to think. I can't think of anything. Why don't you do that? You're not even using any plugins or anything, are you?
No. They shouldn't be at this point. Why that would work. Oh, well, hooray for live demos. What's crazy is this was working with a second ago. Not throwing this kind of problem. Should not be evaluating jQuery. I'm not sure why it is. The only way. Oh, I know why. I know why.
Why?
It's because jQuery is not being treated as a global.
Oh.
That it is a global.
Right. I'm glad that happened because that's something that you have to know.
Yeah. So to set something as a global, so the issue is that jQuery has an embedded require in its code base. Like so it's being treated as AMD, which it kind of is AMD, but because it's not wrapped with AMD, it will execute all of the code outside of what's in its just require. So what that means is, if I were to look at jQuery, like where it does its define, so the code inside here will not be run, but all the other code will be run because, well, that's just how SystemJS works and the build system works. Normally, your code should be wrapped with define, and then the code inside here will not be run. But you can fix this by making jQuery telling it its format is global, and then it. Let me actually look at my other old config how I did this, and then what it exports.
Make sure you do meta.jQuery.
Yep, thank you. Okay. So let me try that again. Okay, so now our app has been built. It transpiles, minifies the code, and then it tries to create bundles. The multi-build is on by default, but it's not actually going to do that, and it's going to build a bundles.main. If I refresh, should see a bundles. When my surprisingly slow IDE finishes that? Okay. So, oh, dist bundles. So here is a here's the bundle that's created with jQuery in tow and the main module. So I should be able to run this by putting my page into production mode. Oh, sorry, data end. Reloading my page. So Matt did the system thing because it got moved? Did the client also get changed?
Yeah, the client got changed. You might, if you don't have the newest Bower, or if you don't have the newest Steel.
I think I pointed to the latest. Latest commit. Unless you just did this very recently.
Saturday.
As I set up today. Let me update my Steel.
I would update it. I mean, it has to work.
I created this today, yeah, but let me try. Okay. Let's see if that fixes it. Oh, it did fix it. All right, good call. Okay, so I get my hello. Huh?
So that scared me.
Yeah. Cool. So hello world, we got to build. Steel also supports including Steel in the bundle now. I don't know. I haven't tried that merge together, but we can try it. So I changed my build to, I think it's bundle Steel. Do true. Let's try and see if it works. This should include a, so now we'd have to change our whole page to actually point to dist bundles main.js. And now we can just load that. And this will work with the multi-build if it had to load other packages because it bundles Steel in it. And it's dist bundles main. Why is it looking for Bower? Oh, PowerPoint's dumb. There we go. We should get the same thing. Not quite. Well, I'll have to look into that. I don't know if I haven't tested this yet since the merge of the location change. That will work. Doesn't work right now. We'll go on. Okay, so let me bring back my page. So it's in, and let's look at how I was able to do a progressively loaded app. Some of this is very CAN-centric and kind of gross CAN.js, but it's worth talking about, I guess, as a company anyways, and showing how we could do this and how we could improve this pattern. Let me open up my temp. Move that back to main here. Let me open up my Steel config. Set that back. Okay. So what I want to do is make an app that quickly, it needs to see if the person's logged in. If they're not logged in, it's going to, let me bring up, show the app again. Let me log out. Okay. So I want the app to load. It's going to quickly see if a session has been established, right? I'm actually pretending it makes an AJAX request through a model layer, a session model, to see if there's a session established. If there's not a session, it's going to bring the person to the login page, but it's not actually going to change the URL to a login page. We're going to wait for the person to log in and then direct them to whatever page they were at. This is kind of a complex, like chicken egg problem to get right, because you don't want to kind of start routing until you've already figured things out here, and then once someone logs out, you don't want to necessarily change it, so if they want to log back in, they can go back to the same page they were at. So to do this, and I want to one other thing this app does is it progressively loads other parts. So once you've logged in, here you can see, once I log in, let me make sure I'm refreshed here. Okay, so it's loading basically all of CanJS and jQuery, and that's basically it. But once I log in, it'll load everything that's needed on the home page. So you can see it loaded home page, and the home page is, you know, mustache, and then or stash. And then if I go to jQuery UI, it loads everything for jQuery UI. And if I go to Bootstrap, it does the same, right? It's a progressively loaded app. To do this, I have an AppState that is eventually going to be two-way bound to the hash. It has properties, a session, if there's a session established, little helper properties if someone's logged in. Ready basically means that we know now whether someone is logged in or not, right? We need to know kind of when that is. Like, okay, well, we at least figured out if someone's logged in or not. And then I have a computed property, which is show page. This is the page to show. If there's a session, then the page is whatever kind of the page property in the hash is. Otherwise, it's going to be the login page, as long as we're ready, as long as we've determined what to show. Otherwise, we should just show loading, essentially. But I didn't get to there yet building this app. So I define my default route to just be whatever the page is and default to the home page. I create an instance of that app state. I have this, and then what I need to do, well, I'll kind of start in slightly different order. I need to load my session, and if I have a session, I'm going to change the app state's attributes so that, hey, there is a session and you're ready. Otherwise, you're just ready, there is no session. So by setting the session or by just saying ready true, that will change which page we're supposed to show. And as long as there's a page we're supposed to show, I'll import the component for that page. And then I'm going to create a little mustache template, or I'll find one that looks like this, a little stash template, so that I can essentially render just kind of a skeleton element and then insert that into the page. So I'm basically loading component, creating an element for it, and putting it in the page, and then people can kind of define. The one thing that I don't like is we need to create a way so you can kind of create component elements relatively easy with specified attributes, because I want to two-way bind the session in my login widget to the session property of the app state. And then I kind of wire everything up, so everything is kind of wired up to the app state, and then when the app state page changes, we're going to just update this kind of HTML element in the page. And then I'm also rendering a site stash, which looks pretty simple. It just has our main element, and then just has a bunch of links that we want in the page. to get the login working, oh, you'll notice here that if you're an ES6 or AMD or CommonJS and you want to load can/can or can map define/define, you can just end it with slash and it will fill it in for you. You cannot do just this. You have to do that if you want to start using ES6. If you want to use Steel, everything just works. Let me show. Okay, so let me show my login widget, and just to remember how it gets there from a page where a user has not logged in. When the app first starts, it's going to load everything here, initialize the app state, and it's going to wire up show page and try to find a session. Session is just going to say, hey, I'm ready. I know whether I have a session or not, but there is no session. So the page that we're supposed to show is going to return login, which is then going to hit what's listening for every time a page changes, render this in stash form and insert that into the page. So that's going to load the components login. And that's really basic. Login just, the login component, all it does is render a form with an email and password, and then when someone submits that form, it's going to call login on the component, which is just going to create a new session and update its own, and because of the two-way binding, the AppState session property, and then say that it's done logging in. If I wanted a little, I was planning on having a little spinner run. And then once someone logs in, so this is going to set the session in the kind of parent AppState. By doing that, show page is going to change to just whatever the page is, the page property in can route, essentially. So this will listen to that change and then go to the home page, for instance. So system import is if you're inside ES6, the way to load a module. This kind of loads a module asynchronously, and not when it's kind of embedded in the actual source code. This is how you kind of programmatically import modules. So that really handles the progressive loading. So then all I do is I basically just have a bunch of other pages, like the home page is even more simple. Yeah.
So go back to that other JavaScript file.
Main.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So how does that work in production? Does that build that component, or is it just loaded all of its dependencies?
What component? What do you?
If you're loading using system import.
Yeah. So to make the progressive loading work, So yeah, let me show what happens when I just build this whole site. So if I just build the site, see how fast that is compared to what it used to be. So this is building the site, but it's not building the packages that we want to progressively load yet. I'll add that in a second. But it is building the main modules stuff. So let me put it in production. And then let me change my build script to not bundling steel. So I don't know if that's working. Okay. So now it doesn't work. Okay. I don't know what I changed that broke this. Stash, something mustache it doesn't like. And when my I've never seen that work, so. Huh. Okay, there's something wrong with stash in building. I will have to get that to work. I basically got parts of the build to work right before this talk, but I will get the rest of it to work today. But Brian, just to answer your question, to get the rest of the build working, you need to tell your system your config file what packages you want or what other bundles you want to make. What are the other modules?
Mm-hmm.
So you write system.bundles, and then I would write components home components. Oh, home. Probably need to write it home / like that. I'm actually not 100% sure that works. I've never tried that. Components home, components jQuery UI. jQuery. You list out the module names that you want to build. Bootstrap.
So then system import will recognize that that's already a built module, a built bundle.
So what it does is it writes to the outputted file. It writes a it specifies which files belong where, so that when it tries to load Bootstrap, components Bootstrap.js, it knows that that's in bundles Bootstrap.js. So if I run the build, it should make those. It does not. Come on. Did I save my? Still complete. Oh, sorry. It's not bundles. It's bundle.
This also works if you put it in the StealConfig call. So if you have an existing StealConfig file, you can just put that in the StealConfig.
This doesn't actually seem to be working. It is system.bundle, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I did mine. I just transferred my StealConfig. So mine's in StealConfig. It's bundle, yeah. I think it's right.
Oh, I'm looking at the wrong thing here. Bundles. It doesn't seem to be picking that up for some reason. This is why I built a real app. Because we definitely have tests that this works in.
No, it's system bundles.
No, that's what it writes out, but it's system.bundle, right? To configure what you need to bundle. Let me make sure here.
I'm not sure.
Tools lib bundle. Test. It's bundle. Maybe it needs to be inside the StealConfig, but I doubt it. If it does, that's a bug. I might as well try it. Oh, that was it. So, can example components home.js. That's adding 3. Oh, yeah. So it does want it like this. Let me see. Okay, there we go. So there's a bug that you still need it. It does all properties are supposed to work both within SteelConfig and in the newer system properties. This one isn't working quite right. That it doesn't work in both places. That will change. But here you can see it bundled. It's interesting. It is not what I would expect the output to be. Let's boot. That's right, but that. Oh yeah, it's making one for. Okay. I'm not sure what it's. Okay, so this is the bundle that's shared by everything, which is the StealJS CSS plugin. That makes sense. Then it's building what's shared by Bootstrap JavaScript, which is just Bootstrap's stash, the Bootstrap itself, and the Bootstrap component, and then the CSS that's there, and it just kind of keeps building everything piece by piece. Looks like there's still a problem with stash in the build, which I'll get that to work shortly. So that's basically it. This is again just a kind of a preview of how it's going to work and where it's going. Any questions?
Steven asked in the Q&A, does StealJS come with System.js?
Yes, it packages it.
Can you show the different syntaxes that it supports? ES6, Steel, you said AMD, is there others?
Yeah, ES6, Steel, AMD, CommonJS, and like global syntax, right? Kind of like you can configure globals the same way you can kind of in AMD and Steel right now.
When are we planning the release of the first version?
I was hoping this week. I mean, we've still got bugs to fix, but that's why I'm building this full-featured app to identify them, which obviously it has. Identified a few of them, but for the most part, it's pretty darn close to being releasable.
What is that meta property? I've never seen that.
That is the equivalent of shim in Steel or in AMD, but it enables more. There's a lot more to it. It adds. There's a metadata property of a load object in ES6 module loader. So every kind of module that you load has this metadata property, and this writes directly to that. And then other plugins are written so that they can read from it and do things, such as like export of value. There's like a plugin that will look for the exports property and export and set up the module to export whatever it finds here in the global window.
Okay.
So even though I'm not showing it in here, the kind of cool thing is you can use. Trying to see if there's here I can. Let me. Someone remind me the syntax for arrow syntax. It's I'm so not used to writing arrow syntax.
It's the double equal. It's the equal sign, I believe. Equal sign, then greater than.
Yeah. It's always got to be on. Oh, it doesn't have to be on one line, but it can be.
Yeah, it doesn't.
So I can do. So if I wanted to replace this catch, I could do. So it's just remove the function, do an arrow, and go like that, right?
No, it's the equal sign. Is that an equal sign?
Yes.
Oh, okay, I can't tell.
Right. So you can do arrow syntax. This should.
Then I think you get the value of this. I can't remember. There's a way where this refers to kind of within your top level function with arrow syntax as well.
What am I still in production here? Yeah. Okay. So you can, well, the big thing, although we're not hitting that code right now, it is not erroring because of a syntax error, because of tracer, which is nice. So basically where I'm going from here is I'm going to get this app to work. You know, we're spending time converting some of our other apps to work. I know, how close is BitHub? I think you said the build guy was working, Kyle.
The build was working. I didn't work on the. I had to work on the packages, so it works. But build was passing correctly. Everything was working. Although there are some issues with CanJS 2.1, I explained before.
Yeah, I mean, I just noticed a problem with Stash. So the problem with Stash is actually probably a problem with Stash and CanJS, and not Steel. Almost certainly, actually, a problem with how CanJS is implemented. I noticed another problem today that we basically can now. What it uses I'm using the DOMless. You'll notice in CanJS there's a Steel DOMless or something like system Steel DOMless branch. That's what you have to use because that has the ability to compile templates. Basically, what we do is when Steel is like, okay, I need to build Stash, instead of using can-util jQuery, and therefore jQuery, which won't run on the client, we can switch it to using using DOMless. Let me show what that is, because that's actually kind of interesting if you guys are authoring plugins and whatnot, how that process works. So let's talk about how Stash works. So when you currently, you have to put a bang when you want to load CSS, less anything. You got to put a special. If you don't want to load a special type, you have to put a bang. We're going to try to remove this. We're kind of, to do it, you kind of have to mix in behavior in a place that System.js, most people aren't mixing in behavior in that way. It still might be possible to just remove the bang. But let's talk about how this works so that you guys can author and potentially improve your own plugin types. So what this is going to do is home.stash bang. It's going to say, okay, there's a bang. That means it's a plugin. What the Steel config will do too is say, okay, well, this extension plugin will say, hey, if it ends in .stash, put after the bang can view stash system, right? So this will say, by putting the bang, it says there's a plugin, but by putting stash, it'll look at the extension and add this after the bang. I'll say load that file and process that file with this plugin. So it'll load this plugin to process whatever login stashes or home.
So if I write the plugin name out, it'll use that, right?
You can write a full path, yes. It's equivalent of writing. I could have written in this, and that would have been just fine.
So that way I could overwrite the loader too, right? If something ends with .stash, but I want to render it with mustache, I could do that.
Yes, you could.
Okay.
Okay, so what that does is going to load can, and this is probably what's breaking in here somehow, but I have to figure it out, is, where's my power components? Can view stash system. Okay. So what this does is it needs to return, it basically provides hooks for this module returns. You can notice here, by the way, we're mixing Steel and CanJS is all in Steel here, but our app was ES6. So it's cool that you can transition and use really what you want. And although this is Steel, this is actually returning. The module it's returning is AMD, which is which is crazy. Anyways, what these plugins do is return the hooks for the system loader, right? So there's different ways you can hook into the behavior of that, like the processing of login stash. What we want to do is hook into the translate hook. And we're going to take the source, the original source, and we're going to wrap it so that it is JavaScript. Essentially, we're just going to make sure that the source looks like it's something that requires stash, you know, and then uses that to build the stash template. And that's what the module value will be. This source is what would get put into a template. Now, the problem is if you load, if this module then is going to require for this to run, it needs to load can-view stash. And can-view stash depends on can-util, and can-util in the client at least depends on jQuery. What you can do in your Steel config is tell it a build config override, that this config and the values it provides only occur in when you're actually building. So what I say is I want can-util, instead of normally mapping to jQuery, to can-util DOMless. And this is a substitute that works in Node for everything like a can-util that normally would load jQuery or Zepto or MooTools. This one doesn't load anything and provides essentially what the templates need to do their behavior. And likely the reason why something is breaking is kind of related to our plugins. The way I author the plugins, not related to Steel itself. But I will fix those, and we will hopefully shortly, you know, there's a chicken and egg problem for releasing Steel. We really need it to support CanJS, or there's no real reason to release it.
Justin, the app that I converted uses stash for sure, and it works, so I don't know.
Yeah, your version of stash might not be doing the same thing as mine. I noticed that, you know, I had built stash before, but then today can isArray wasn't in DOMless, and I had code in stash that was hitting can isArray.
What is it doing to build stash? Like, is it pre-compiling anything? Like
No. No.
So it's just taking the text and puts it into the preloader.
Yes.
Okay.
Pre-compiling stash, because it doesn't use eval, is not straightforward. It's not impossible, but to kind of have some intermediary data structure that would be processed faster, but it's not nearly as straightforward as EJS and Mustache are. Well, it could be very straightforward, but to do it really good, it's not quite straightforward. You could just remove the parser part, like give the output of the parser, pipe that directly into can stash. But you wouldn't. I don't think you would be saving very much time. And that object would be bigger than the template itself in terms of like how much you're sending down to the client. Anyways, so that's it. I'm hoping by the end of this week we'll have a version of Can and a version of Steel that work really, really well together, and people can start migrating to this. Any other questions? We do have Grunt, but I wasn't able to get that working. I'll probably have another one of these next week, where I'll have the app better fleshed out, working obviously, and Grunt and things like that all demoed and showcased in this example app.
Steven has a question. He said, is Almond.js necessary now that there's shim and StealTools?
Depends on what you mean. I don't know if Almond supports loading things progressively. Does anybody know that? I would say it depends. If Almond can load things, I guess it's my understanding that Almond it's just for, well, I actually don't know. If Almond is just for a single file you're basically loading in production, and it's just making sure things are called in the right order, but everything is in that one file, then no, Almond is not necessary. Because you can just pluginify. I didn't show pluginify either. You can just pluginify your app and then load the result of that, and then you're fine. Then you don't need Steel. And in some ways, if you're just doing a single production file, that's actually what you should do. It doesn't what? I assume you mean it doesn't load files. So then, yes, it's not necessary because you would just pluginify your app and then load that single file and not incur the cost of Steel or anything else. But if you want to progressively load an app, I would really like it so our build is compatible with, even though it might be tricky because of the different configs, that it's compatible with AMD so that you could progressively load an app with require.js instead of system.js. The good thing about all of this, though, is that eventually, if you're starting a project now and you're not releasing for like a year or something like that, hopefully some browsers within the next year support the system loader. And there's also polyfill for, what's it called? There's a polyfill for promises that are packaged up in system.js as well. So without those two things, and if you're kind of compiling all your types, you don't need all your plugins and things like that. You mostly have just JavaScript. Steel and system.js get very, very small for the most part. Which will be good. So you can progressively load your app, but you're not really loading too much extra stuff just to be able to do the Steel things, because that'll be part of system.js in the browser.
Does Pluginify, does it export to, what does it export to? Just to a global, or can you like specify that you want it to like export, you want it to run with AMD, or if you have a module? Like,
no. Well, no. You can export to AMD. There's a Transpile project, and you can export it to whatever you want.
I'm not sure what you mean by that.
Well, there's different versions of Pluginify, right? There's like Matt can maybe talk a little bit more about this, but at least how it should be working is how it used to work, where you can export into kind of a single global, like that you can just put in the page and it just loads without needing AMD there. Or you can do what we've done before, which is export each individual file to, actually I don't know if we don't do that though. We just use Transpile in a script, right?
With Pluginify, you can export each individual file if you want to.
With our plug, I mean, there's no like way to call that, right? We don't support that. We just do that ourselves in CAN.
Well, I mean, yeah, if you wrote your own build script, you could do it. It's not like through the command line or anything like that.
Yeah.
What I'm asking is like, if I was a plugin author, let's say I wrote a CAN component that wraps like a grid CAN component, and I wanted to release it to the world, and some people wanted to use it with AMD, and some people wanted, and it has a tree of dependencies. Some people want to use it with AMD, and some people want ES6, and some people want Steel. Is it easy to make a build script that like exports those like 3 versions of it that are flattened and runs those 3 exports?
No. I mean, it's not easy. It's medium.
We could build something like that. I don't know if StealTools is the place for that, but we could build something that made that easy.
That would be cool. I think that would be something people would want this project for.
I don't think that's what I don't think that's what StealTools should be doing though. StealTools, like I don't think.
But StealTools has the graph and all of that. That's like the part that makes it.
That's the hard. That's what I'm saying. That's why it's not. I think people can. StealTools should. It's not. Basically, there should be this low-level stuff that StealTools does. That is basically just here's your graph. Here's the transpiling tools, and you can just quickly loop through that graph if you want, and output however you want. We'd probably have to have a different API. I don't know. It's not bad. It's not. Even with CAN, we would never be. I don't think we would be able to use our own version of what you just talked about, Brian, because CAN has so much complexity to it. I don't think we could even use CAN.js. We couldn't even use it on CAN.js. We'd still have to kind of loop through and do things unless we made the option set extremely large for configuring the behavior of writing out individual files for different transpile target types. I don't know if that makes sense. There's a lot of different ways I think that people would want to do that.
I mean, if we could just get something simple that solves that use case, I think it would encourage people to share their work more often. Because you're to like write something simple that you don't have to worry. You can just run a script in it, and it creates versions that anyone can use in any of their systems.
Yeah.
It's not so hard. It's more like AMD folder structure is different than Steel folder structure, so you have to like take that into account. I agree that it would be nice to have them.
Cool. So that's it. I was hoping by today it would be ready to really start being used in projects, but I kind of proved to myself that it's not quite there yet, unfortunately. But I'm hoping by next week it will be. So I'll probably plan another one of these to show off a more full-featured app that's actually working, how to integrate with Grunt, and maybe how to just going through here's how you install it, have some documentation ready, that kind of thing. So the reasons to use it for those who are watching, especially starting next week once it's working, is I just think it's very future forward project because you can use anything with it, and then it does support the next versions of JavaScript, some of the syntax there, so you can start writing more terse code. So I'm hoping that Steel is timed very well, that it's like we got this production ready build system all in place when ES6 modules come out. We have all those kind of workflows ready. CAN.js is on ES6. Everything's like brand spanking new right as it drops in Chrome. It'll be a great story.
Did you guys start working on a website for it?
I started putting together like the old CAN site and starting to add documentation. It's something I do to kind of help guide the API design. Right? When you start writing documentation, it's a good way to like figure out what the API should be to make things as easy and straightforward to get into as possible.
Cool. Looks good.
So yeah, hopefully next week we can start converting a lot of our apps over. I'll be reaching out to people who feel like they might want to do that. And if you feel like you're a good candidate, if you want to start trying it, let me know this week, and I can help you migrate it over. It actually doesn't take much because it still supports Steel. It's mostly configuration stuff, and maybe potentially finding bugs that I will fix for you with things like stash or mustache not compiling correctly. And you can see how much faster it runs. And I want to add watches eventually too, so you can it'll just recompile itself in the background on the fly. All right, guys. Thanks.
Cool. Yeah.